this concept of we can have security as long as we have our boot securely placed against their neck. As long as they can't stand up because we're standing on them, as long as we have enough soldiers, we have enough checkpoints, enough walls, keeping them penned in, as long as we bomb their infrastructure enough that they can't build anything that they could use to attack us with, as long as we keep doing that, then we will be safe. To me, that's fundamentally a losing strategy.
So to me, it isn't.
Okay.
I mean, I would just not. I would remove the last part of what you've said about bombing them every once in a while, right? I would remove that, but like, I would say that, yeah, when you have power over a hostile population, basically, as long as there is belligerence, an occupation should continue. I think also that's international law, by the way.
Sure. Do you believe that? So to state the rest of my position in terms of the positive case, I'm not so naive to say, well, if you take away all the walls, suddenly this population that hates you because of what you've done to them will suddenly stop hating you, and it'll suddenly become a paradise, and everybody will live in peace, and everything will be wonderful. I'm not saying that. I want to be clear. But in order to move to a situation with real peace, real security, and yes, justice is also important, then you have to normalize relations. You have to move toward living together as equals. You need to give people back dignity and human rights and self-autonomy. And that's the only way forward toward lasting peace. And if a group of people says, we will keep our foot on their neck until they simply stop resisting, my interpretation of that statement is to say, we will keep our foot on their neck until they die. That's my interpretation of what that says. Because if you say we will never give them dignity, human rights, until they simply become utterly passive, to me, the clear interpretation is ethnic cleansing or genocide or something like that. If you say, I have no plan to ever move toward peace or justice until they're just utterly passive.
Okay, so a couple of things about that. First off, about the okay, I'll start at the end. Okay, that you said basically you have no intention of ever removing your boot from their neck. I would love for Israel to remove its boot from their necks, but I do think that there needs to be some radical reform. And when I say radical, I mean, extreme. I don't mean necessarily like Islamist. A radical reform within Palestinian society in order to enable that, because right now, from what I see in the papers, in the the widespread opinions, it's basically you can't. Resistance is such a value, and martyrdom is such a value in there that you just can't do that. That would be suicide. How do you reform a society? I have no idea. Especially when they keep being egged on by the rest of the Muslim world, right? So that's about that. I can't give you a solution, but I know what is the wrong solution. I think the wrong solution is let's kumbaya, which you've also kind of said yourself. Now, as for the other thing, here's the problem with the main with the belief that their lives are miserable, they'll resist, they'll do whatever, and I think really what you would have to do in order to debunk that view is to imagine a world in which there is no occupation and see what happens. But luckily, you have several years of Israel's existence, right, without occupation, and you see what happens. So you have basically, here's the thing: the Arab narrative is always feels like victory is imminent. That's basically October 7th, right? Victory is imminent. We're destroying the Zionist entity now. This is the end days, right? But it's also been the narrative in 48, right? Why did the civil war start in 47? because the Arabs believed that they could remove the Jews and, like, abolish the Zionist idea. There was no occupation then, right? Now, I'm not saying that, sins of the fathers, right? You don't inherit the sins of your fathers, but in a certain way, you also kind of do, because the Palestinians of today, which I don't like this, by the way, they're still paying for the absolute failures of their leaderships, successive leaderships in the past 75 years, or more actually, right? And even before the partition plan, there were conspiracy theories against the Jews or trying to take over Al-Aqsa Mosque, for example. That's what caused the Hebron massacre of 1929, right? 1929. So it's not just the occupation. There's this fundamental hostility. It's, I've spoken to an American Muslim a couple of days ago when he told me something interesting. He told me that that there's this thing about the Palestinians, that when they need to unleash Islam, they crack it open a little bit and then they close it when it fits them, right? So there's this. They know how to inspire this worldwide religious fervor. And then they feel like victory is imminent. They start a war to destroy Israel, and then they lose badly. And what do? They get the Nakba, or they get what's happening today in Gaza. So I really, it's not that I like it. I don't want to destroy anyone's lives, but I don't think Israel should commit suicide by essentially, turning the other cheek.
So from your perspective, is there anything that Israel could do to improve relations between Israelis and Palestinians?
Well, I'm
because
so glad.
I haven't heard anything.
I'm so glad you've asked that.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you asked that. Yes, I do believe that Israel is missing something big time. They're not many. There are very few, but there are Palestinian reformist voices. They're small. They're far in between, but they exist. And Israel, I think, should embrace them instead of silencing them. So that's how I see it. There are voices being heard. These people, unfortunately, they won't talk to me, or when they talk to me, they would hide their faces because it's dangerous in the Palestinian territories to talk like that, but in a conciliatory manner. But yes, so I do think that there are things that Israel should do.